When I was a kid, you got upset. It means something was coming to you.
Yeah, I mean, usually psak is from the yes.
Yeah.
No.
See the house, you get upset, something's coming to you.
No, psak means a ruling from a rebbe. If you want to know, are we allowed to eat this thing, or is this chicken kosher, or that's a psak halacha. Yeah, that's appropriate way. That's appropriate way to use it in the context. It's just you have to figure out if they really got that, or they were advised that for yeshiva place, you don't have to give APs. And yes, the attempt is to make it a very, very yeshiva place. Not I'm saying what this person's doing. Yeah. Okay. Here we go.
So we finished reading Parshat Bereshit from the book. From the oral.
Sefer Bereshit. Is that what you mean?
I'm really
Wow.
beginning to love China B'Chisda.
Amazing.
You go beyond the surface.
Yeah, it's very different. Very different.
Eventually, I get to it.
We read it together, we learn it together.
Wow, I'm so happy.
Daphne reads the English.
The Hebrew is hard. For me, it was hard.
It's like rabbinic.
Okay.
Is Vayikra coming out on time? Is that a plan?
We hope so. I have to get started like next week. I'll have to schmooze. I'll keep you posted. I have to reach out to the publisher and get a contract and see. Yeah.
Otherwise, it's...
They will need the thing by Parshas Vayikra this year. They would need the full manuscript so that they can start a year in advance. So it means I need, 8-10 weeks before to finish it up. Okay. Shemos begins with a really great story about Moshe and how he came to be. He was born in this very dark time. Parents had to toss him into the Nile. The daughter of Paro shows up. And then we don't really know anything about him yet. The first thing we're told about him, the first thing he ever does, this most important man in Jewish history, is just before he commits the murder or the whatever, the killing. He does the honor killing. It was a big mitzvah what he did. But what happened is, it says that... that sound. Vayigdal, he became great. Vayetze el echav, and he went. Vayigdal Moshe. Moshe became a great man, a great person. That's called a gadol. Vayetze el echav. He went out to his brothers. Vayar b'sivlosam, and he saw how much they were suffering. He saw them. Then he saw an Egyptian man hitting a Jewish man. Vayar b'sivlosam. So the Medrash Rabbah says, Rashi quotes it right there. Nosan enov v'libo lihios meitzar alehem. He took his eyes, he placed his eyes and his heart. So it required two things. It required looking and feeling in order to experience their pain, meitzar alehem, to feel pain for them. So Moshe set to it. It was a task for him. It was a job. I need to empathize with these people. What was he going to use? Which parts of his body? His eyes and his heart. Okay. Now, earlier, in the end of Bereshis, so it says, Vayechi Yaakov, the very beginning thing of the Parsha. And Rashi says, Lama Parsha Zu Sesuma. Why is this section of the Torah written in a way that's completely sealed up? It's sealed. When you look at Parshas Vayigash, as the entire Sedra ends, there's no break at all between Vayigash and Vayechi. It's very unusual. It's the only place. So, Lama Parsha Zu Sesuma. Why is the end of Bereshis, Vayechi, is sealed up? Kivan Sheniftar Yaakov Avinu. Because when Yaakov Avinu died, Nistimu, Einehem v'libam shel Yisrael. The eyes and the hearts of the Jewish people began to seal up and close. Mitzaras hashibud shehischilu l'shavna, because of the pain of the enslavement, which began at the death of Yaakov. So as Yaakov died, their eyes and hearts sealed up. Moshe shows up on the scene, and his eyes and heart are open. And then it goes on a little bit further. The response is that, listen to this one. Vayar Elokim es b'nei Yisrael. So Hashem saw the Jewish people. Vayeda Elokim, and he knew. So says Rashi, Nasan aleim leiv. He paid attention to them. He was no same leiv. V'lo ha'elim einav, and he didn't hide his eyes. Okay, so you can't miss this eyes and heart thing. So what happened? Once we see that the eyes and heart close up when a person is in trouble, we start to understand that it's very, very difficult to feel someone else's pain in any meaningful way when you have pain. It's very hard to empathize with another person. If you have just stubbed your toe, so you have no patience for anyone else. And especially if somebody's going through something difficult, the whole world becomes about you when a person's in pain. That's how it goes. So you'll have a person who's going through whatever personal trauma or whatever personal trouble, and even other people's experiences they have no sense for. And we'll talk about that in a minute. In other words, there's an expression almost. We'll get back to this later, but saras rabim chatzi nechama. It's almost like misery loves company, right? It means that when there's but saras rabim, like a sorrow shared is a sorrow halved. That saras rabim, when everyone has, so we'll try to find out what's the real message of that. But it's very interesting. In other words, we have this fascinating experience that if somebody else gets something good, do you ever wonder about this? I've thought about this a lot. If you are not so wealthy, and somebody else is buying a third house and a fourth car and going on some fancy Europe trip, so the human condition is to be jealous of that. People get jealous. And I always tell myself, I always tell my children, whenever they mention anyone in their class having something fancy, I say, like, I'm so happy for them. They're not taking mine. It's not mine. This person's going to get 10, 20, 30 houses. Good for them. I mean, they're not taking mine away. I'd be upset if they stole it from me, but why should it at all bother me? So where does that come from? So part of it, and we'll see more, but part of it just is when I'm in pain, I can't be so happy for somebody else. It's a big job. When I'm suffering, it's very hard to be sympathetic to anyone else's pain. I become self-centered. And that's not the Jewish way. The Jewish way is Moshe, is that redemption comes when a person focuses not on themselves, but focuses on other people. And we'll see that that's a big message, because Vayar b'sivlosam, the greatness of Moshe was his compassion for other people. In fact, I'll just read you the language of a medrash here.
But usually when somebody goes through something, he can empathize with somebody else who's going through the same thing.
Excellent. That is the very productive way to use empathy. In other words, to use pain, it's supposed to be that way. Most human beings don't do it. They wallow in their victim status, and it makes them feel, you understand, like, so I'll give you an example of how we see this. Moshe Rabbeinu was born, and we see that the Torah makes a big deal out of the fact that even though he got a name from his parents, they give him a Jewish name, the name Moshe was given to him by the daughter of Paro, and that becomes his name. And the Sforno says that the reason for that is because he would save other people. He was saved from the water, and he would save other people. And he says that's why his name is Moshe, which means one who saves others. It ought to have been Mashui, which means one who is pulled out, one who's drawn out. Moshe is grammatically incorrect, but says the Sforno, no, it's to say that you were saved, and now you will save other people. In the Haggadah, maybe one day there'll be a 6th volume of the Haggadah. You never know. We're just going to... So the Haggadah says, begins with a really remarkable life lesson that comes straight out of this. It says, this is the bread of affliction that our ancestors ate in Egypt. All who are hungry, come and eat. There's no flow between those two things. If you want to invite anybody, open up the Seder with anyone hungry, come and eat. Now, it's a weird time to invite people. Right? You think to do that when they can hear you, right? But okay, right? If you want to say it's a formal thing, but why does it follow? This is the bread of affliction that our ancestors ate in Egypt. Anyone who's hungry, come and eat. So the answer is very simple. If you are going to sit with your family or even by yourself and mention how much you've suffered, you're in danger of becoming an insufferable person. Look at us. We were slaves hundreds of years ago in Egypt, right? I'm saying it about us. I'm not saying about in the United States. They're allowed to say whatever they want, right? But you see how bad that is for societies. When a person makes being a victim the most heroic, wonderful thing, and taking any responsibility for your life. So you know what you do with victimhood? You turn to your children and you say, we once suffered. Do you know anyone else suffering who's hungry? Because they're always welcome in our house. Now, whether or not this is the right time for it is an irrelevant detail. You have to turn any suffering you have, like Daphne said, into something that makes you a bigger person, a better person, someone who can give and improve the world. You're not allowed to turn suffering into a selfless, hedonistic almost, onanistic behavior. People really do that. They just like wallow in their pain, and they don't help themselves, and they don't help the world, and the world ends up a worse place. So, very, very important to understand that that's the call of the Jewish person, and that's like the name Moshe. In other words, something bad happened to you. How are you going to use that forward? And so Moshe is the first person to demonstrate this behavior in the Torah. Vayar b'sivlosam, vayigdal, he becomes great in that way. And the Medrash says like this. It tells a story. Amar Kadosh Baruch Hu, Ata hinachta asakecha. You abandoned the things that you were busy with. In other words, he was in the palace. He had stuff to be busy with. V'halachta lir'os betza'aron shel Yisrael. And you went out of your natural environment to see the pain of the Jewish people. V'nahagta b'hen minhag achim. And you behaved with them just like brothers. Ani me'niach asa alyonim. So I will leave the heavens, and whatever else I'm busy with in the world. So I have what to do in the heavens. There are stars and planets and all kinds of things to do there. There's angels to deal with. Oseh shalom bimromov. You have to make shalom up there because these great tzaddikim are all up there. Rav Shach and Lubavitch Rebbe are both in Gan Eden. So Oseh shalom bimromov. Okay, I don't know if that's a real Egyptian, but they had peace over there. So I'm going to leave all these things behind. Va'adaber imach, and I'm going to speak to you. And that's why when did Hashem speak to Moshe the first time? What's the famous story? The burning bush.
60 years later.
And it says, so where did that come from? It came from this behavior. And it says, Vayar Hashem kisar liros. So the pasuk normally is read, Hashem saw that Moshe turned away to check out the burning bush. Sar liros means he turned to look. Because the Medrash, it doesn't mean then. Ra'a HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Hashem saw in Moshe, Shesar me asakav, and he turned away from everything else he could have been busy with in life. Liros besivlosam, to see the pains of the Jewish people. Lefikach, it is for that reason that Hashem called to him from the sneh. In other words, Moshe's character was that he was a sar liros. He was one who turned away in order to see things that most people would want to hide their eyes from. And he looked. Most of us don't look. It's too hard to look. I saw it this morning. Somebody was davening. Guy came in, and this guy just kept looking forward. He just couldn't. Now, I don't really blame somebody who wants to daven. It's probably better if people, in some places, they even ask people to wait till after davening to go around. But he just couldn't look. If he would have made eye contact with this man, and the guy would have shown him, I'm trying to marry off one of my 12 children, and he would be very hard for him not to give $1. But by not looking, it made it a little bit easier. So Moshe was looking to look. So God called to him from the burning bush. Okay, so that was the merit. Now, one more medrash. The medrash goes on a little bit later. Moshe said, Asura na ve'ereh. Earlier in the medrash, it described how he behaved. I want to read you this also. Vayar b'simloso. What does it mean that he saw their pains? Moshe would see the Jewish people suffering with heavy work, and he would cry. He would say, it's such a shame to me that you have this trouble. Mi yitain, if only Mi yitain mosi alechem. If only I could die for you. She'ein lecha melacha kasher mimeleches hatit. There is no more back-breaking labor than what they were doing with this tar. V'hayanosin ksefav, and he would lower his shoulders. U'mesayeh lekol echad ve'echad. He would help every single person that he could. And that's something. So that's how Moshe was behaving. That's what he was doing on a day-to-day basis. But yeah, it's not that he saw it. So this is a really big deal, I think. In the world today, being compassionate is just the most important thing. And it means being compassionate about Palestine and being compassionate about all kinds of, themes and topics and virtue signaling. And that's totally not what it's supposed to mean. Sitting at a distance and saying, I feel the pain of these people, is not what it means. It means lowering your shoulders. Vayar b'sivlosam means not just to see it, but to get into the weeds and to actually do something. And to sacrifice personal comfort and finances. And that's really what it means to be a compassionate person. And Hashem saw this, and he says that's going to be the Moshe Rabbeinu. Now, let's go a little further. Why the burning bush? Why that? So Rashi says, "V'lo ilan acher." It wasn't a different tree than the burning bush. Mishum, because imo anoichi betzara, because of the pasuk in Tehillim 91. It talks about Yoshev b'seiser elyon, and it ends with imo anochi betzara, achaltzehu ve'achabdehu. So Hashem says, I am with you in your troubles. So this little sneh, this little bush, Hashem appearing in the lowest, most, insignificant bush would mean that there's no place. So that's achaltzehu, means I will save him. But what's achabdehu? And I will honor him. I mean, I understand a person's in trouble, they want God to save him or strengthen him. Achaltzehu could be strengthen, or it could be to relieve, like chalitza. But what is achabdehu? What is I will respect him? So Rabbi Weinfeld once said, and he says, one of the most common things that people have when they have trouble is they think, why me? Why me? They say, God has forgotten me. He forgot me. He's not paying attention to me. He's not giving me the attention that I deserve. Hashem shechechani, it says in the Navi, that people can feel that way. And so that's why he said that saras rabim chatzi nechama. We quoted before is that when there's a pain for everyone, it's a partial healing, because then if it's happening to everyone, you don't feel as bad. Why me? It's not about me. It was everyone had to deal with this, or a lot of people had to deal with this. So that's a very helpful thing. But achabdehu, to honor him, meaning Hashem is coming down to the burning bush. He's coming to this very low place. It's not that he forgot about you. He was paying close attention to you this whole time. And he cares about you. And he wants what's best for you. And when a person can see that, imo anochi betzara, so then that's an enormous amount of respect that they're experiencing. Because the difference between whether or not a person will feel that their troubles have meaning is whether or not they have self-respect. Instead, in other words, a person who has self-respect will then feel that they're here for a very important reason, and God knows exactly what he's doing with them. And he hasn't left them behind. They're not insignificant. They're the most significant person in the world, and they're here to save the world, and they're here to do big things. And that's how the Jewish people have always managed to get through all of their troubles. Is that we don't understand why we went through all these troubles, but we know we are very important. And we know that one moment of just dying, Al Kiddush Hashem, is an eternal achievement. And so there's an achabdehu, there's a respect that is necessary for the Jewish people to get out of Mitzrayim. Appreciating all these years of trouble and suffering is the truth of Mitzrayim, as it says to Yaakov. The good of Egypt is that the Jewish people became who they became out of that experience, even though it was extremely and exceedingly painful. So the Medrash even says something really interesting. Hashem says at the burning bush, he says, Moshe, Moshe. Now, he does that with a few other people. Avraham, Yaakov, and Shmuel. But that's not Hashem calling to him and saying, Noach. It's just, right, Elah told us, Noach, Kama, Noach is son. Okay. But here we really have Hashem said, Avraham, and he said, Hineni. But the Medrash says, Aval Moshe ein bo pesek. In all the other ones, the reading is Avraham. But Moshe is without anything to stop the reading from being, there's nothing in between that commas it up. So why? Mashallah Adam Shenasan Alav Masui Gadol. Imagine a person who was given a crushing thing to carry. And it's much too heavy for him. And he needs someone to quickly come. Right? This happened earlier. Something that was like all stacked up. Someone, the cleaning lady today, stacked up all these things. And as I walked by, it fell into my foot. And now my foot was like, 3 inches in the air. And if I move it, everything goes toppling. So I quickly have to call someone over to I can't bend down and get it. I won't be able to keep my foot there. Can someone else come bend down and pick it up and move it so that we don't lose 10 minutes of cleanup? Right? So my wife was nearby. So Baruch Hashem. Right? So that's save the day. So what do you do when you say that? If a person has a masui that's really heavy and you can't bear it yourself, you say, Kare, ploni krovi, prok me alai masui zu. You'll call urgently to your beloved close relative or friend or something. Karov is usually a relative. Help me get this off my back. Help carry it with me. So Hashem, the Medrash is saying, was in desperate pain. Because Ima Anochi B'tzar, God is with us in the pain. So he calls to Moshe and he says, Moshe, it's time for you to help me with this. Help my people. Meaning Hashem doesn't help us in that way. He gives us the pain, right? He's the one who set up the situation. And then he feels extreme pain. And all he wants is for us to get out of it. But he built the world with free choice. And he built the world that he's not going to mix into these things. So they came and they said they asked, the rabbis of the Gemara asked Mashiach, when are you coming? And he said, today. Rabbi went home, and he didn't, because he went back, and he said, you lied to me. He says, no, you didn't let me finish. Right? Hayom im bekolo tishmo. Don't ask me why Mashiach's not coming. Ask yourself why Mashiach's not coming. The pasuk says, today, if you will just listen to his voice. So Hashem set up a world where it's exceedingly painful for him, metaphorically, because as it says in Eov, mipi elyon lo tetze haros v'hatov. Good and evil doesn't really come from God. Good and evil comes from human choices. Right? It comes from our choices. It comes from our behaviors. We have the choice. In fact, we even find this idea that there can be a gezerah, but tshuva utfila utzedakah. Listen to the words. Ma'avir, they remove roa hagezerah. They don't change the gezerah necessarily. Some Mepharshim point out, but those behaviors can take away roa hagezerah. They can take away the evil of the decree. The decree will remain, but the roa is gone, because with tshuva and tefillah and tzedakah, you become a different person. You experience it differently. You grow from it. But what about this question? If only I would know. I'm telling you, this is the most common thing. I spoke to a group of girls this Saturday night in Lakewood. Hello, Yitzi. I spoke to the very prestigious attorney has joined us. No, it was free. It was free. I have shorts when I use them. No, I have to. They were free. No, it's okay. So it says like this in the Medrash, right? So these girls, I was talking to, one of the biggest challenges is you have people that have gone through very difficult things in life. And it's like, if only I would just know why. It's a very common thing that people say. It's a very common sentiment. If only I would know why I had to go through this. Why me? Rabbi Shua ben Karcha, Rabbi Hoshaya. Moshe turned away to not look at the burning bush. So one of them said, Echad mehen omer. One of these great rabbis said, Lo yafeh asa Moshe. Moshe didn't do the right thing when he hid his face. Listen why. She'ilule lo histir panav. If Moshe would not have looked away and would have gone head first into the burning bush experience, Gilalo HaKadosh Baruch Hu Moshe, God would have revealed to Moshe, Mala, what is above, Umala Mata, and what is below. Mashahaya, everything that's ever happened, Uma She'asid Lios, and everything that would ever happen. Ubasov Bikesh Lios. Now later, Moshe did ask to see. He said, Hareini Noas Kodecha, God, show me your glory. And God said to Moshe, I came and offered to show you that, and you hid your face. Now, I'm going to tell you you can't see me and go on living. When I asked you, you didn't want, and now it's too late. That's the story. However, Amar Yeshua desafnim b'shem Reb Levi, afal pikein, even though this is true, Hera lo b'schar vayaster Moshe panav. Hashem did show him because in the merit of hiding his face. V'diber Hashem el Moshe panim el panim. Meaning he showed him. In the merit of this, Moshe got to speak to Hashem face to face. So because he turned his face away out of respect, it seems, the simple reading of the Mepharshim says out of respect, not wanting to stare directly, so he was rewarded with speaking to God face to face, which no other person did. B'schar ki yoreh, since he was fearful of Hashem, so he was rewarded with vayiru migeshes elav. He was rewarded that he glowed with such a sharp, a magnificent glow that everybody was afraid to come close to him. Ubeschar mehabit, since he wouldn't look, utmunas Hashem yabit. It says in Bamidbar Yud Beis that he could see an image of God more than anyone else. Hoshaya Rabbah then said, Yafa asa she'ester panav. He did the right thing. So they both agree that he denied this opportunity to see all this greatness. The question, was it right or was it wrong? Why would it be right? You could say it's disrespectful to stare, but then he saw it later. He wanted it later. Do you remember what Moshe asked when it says, show me your glory, and God says, you can't see me and live? So the Gemara in Brachos says he asked to see why bad things happen to good people and good things happen to bad people. Because God is infinite and God is great. Clarity would be a horrible curse. Do you understand how little empathy you would have for someone if you knew the whole story? Moshe Rabbeinu had empathy for the Jewish people. But if he could see it from God's perspective, why this is exactly right, and how they all are going to get out of slavery and everything's going to be okay, there is no more empathy. And Moshe wanted to have empathy. So he decided not. Clarity is not a good thing. Knowing the day that you will die, knowing who you're going to marry from the minute you're born, none of that is good for you. It's not the right thing. Everyone says, no, for me it would be good. If only I would know. There is nothing you could know. Knowledge and emotions are two completely separate planes of understanding. And knowing something clearly doesn't help anything when it comes to pain. The angels cried into the eyes of Yitzchak at the Akedah. It says that in Rashi on Chumash, that Hashem opened up the heavens, and the angels' tears fell into Yitzchak's eyes, and that's why, as an old man, he was blind. It's a very mysterious thing, but it says that in Rashi on Chumash. And Rav Shmuel Birnbaum asked why they have to open the heavens. Meaning, and if the heavens are not open, because then the angels' tears were going to hit the heavens. What is it, right? It's a funny thing to say. Like, what do you need to open the heavens? And he says, because if they would have just stayed in heaven and not seen it from an earthly perspective, they wouldn't have been crying. Because they'd know Yitzchak's not going to die. They know everything's going to be okay. And they know the end of the story. The tears only come from the experiential lack of clarity. What makes Akedah Chitzak a magnificent thing is that none of the people involved had any idea what was to come. Understand? So, in this world, we don't have clarity. And that's what allows for empathy and for tefillah. In fact, there's this amazing Gemara in Brachos Lamed Daled. It says, Shuv Maisa, there was this story by Rabbi Chanina ben Dosa. Rabbi Chanina ben Dosa was younger. Shahalach lilmod Torah etzel Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. And he arrived to study Torah with Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, the Chala benosh Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. And Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai's son got ill. So the Talmud is Rabbi Chanina ben Dosa. Amar lo, Chanina beni, my son, Chanina, bakesh alav rachim. Would you daven for my son? V'yichya, so he should live. So he was very, very ill. Hiniach Rosha ben Birkov. He put his head between his knees. Pretty limber fellow. I guess he wasn't one of the fat rabbis. Many of the rabbis of the Gemara were massive because they were attractive. I mean, that's how it works, He was a scrawny guy, maybe. I don't know how he got his head between his knees. And he bikesh alav rachamim, and he davened Hashem v'chaya, and he lived. Amar Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai said, "Ilmole hitiach ben Zakkai es Rosha ben Birkov." If he called himself by his name, he said this rabbi, right, would have put his head between his knees for an entire day. Kol hayam kula lo hayam mashgichin olav. They paid no attention to me in Shemayim. He's praising the power of Rabbi Chanina ben Dosa's prayer. Amar lo ishto. So his wife overheard this and said, "V'chi chamina galu mincha? Is this guy greater than you? Did I marry the wrong guy? Is Rabbi Chanina the great?" She said, "No." Amar lo lav. Absolutely not. Hu doma ke'eved l'fnei. He is like a slave who comes before the king, and I am like a sar who comes before the king. So for the cabinet member to just walk into the room doesn't work that way. He makes an appointment. He comes in the appropriate way. But the Evan who's just sweeping up, so he comes in and out all the time. So he can just throw in a couple words sometimes to the king that no one else can do because he doesn't exist. He's furniture. So he says, Rechnina ben Dosa is like an Eved and I'm like a Sar, and therefore, that's a simple reason. The Kedushas Leith says something really, really beautiful. He says, an Eved has no idea what the king is really thinking. He doesn't understand all the considerations. He says, the Sar, right, is like the Grand Vizier. He knows everything. So he understands all the big picture stuff. So for him to get so carried away about this one person living or this one person dying, you see this with like the hostages and other things, like when you're dealing with an entire country and what's really best. So like, where's the room for this compassion? And the answer really is there isn't so much room for that. Like some people are going to die in a war and sometimes you don't risk, right? But the person who's a family member, the person who just has this one single-minded. So in this case, when it was necessary to pray for someone, he was saying like, I see things a different way because I was exposed to so much spirituality that I don't have the ability to daven in that way. That a simpler mind, almost a simpler person, a less now this is Rabbi Chanina ben Dosa. This is not a simple mind, God forbid, but simpler than Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai's achievements, right? So in other words, Moshe Rabbeinu was prepared to give up spiritual insight, spiritual growth, in order that he should be able to really empathize with the Jewish people, because that's what they needed, to open his heart and that's what caused Hashem. The relationship that we will have with God will ultimately be based upon V'ahavta l'recha kamocha ani Hashem. It will come from the fact that if we feel these sort of feelings of compassion and mercy, and so then that connects us enormously to Hashem. That's a very explicit thing. I'll share with you from one more consideration, and I want to share with you with Shimon Shkap. So there's a Gemara that says, Ma bein olam hazeh la'olam haba. It's a Gemara named Psachim 49. What is the difference between this world and the world that will be in the end of time, in the times of Mashiach? What's the difference? So Gemara says, because in this world, we have two blessings that we make. On good things, we make hatov v'hametiv, and on bad things, we make dayan ha'emes. And in the next world, we're just going to have one bracha, hatov v'hametiv. So you would think that the Gemara is saying, in this world, good stuff and bad stuff happens. In the next world, good stuff happens. But then why blame it on the blessings? Just say what you mean. Say, in this world, good things happen. In the next world, only good things happen, and none of the bad things. So says the Noda B'Yehuda in the Sefer Tzlach on that Gemara, and it's also found from the Divrei Chaim of Tzanz. They say like this: we are monotheists, and we believe everything in the universe comes from God. And that presents a serious philosophical problem of where does evil come from? If God is infinitely good and everything he does is good, right, then where is there evil? And if part of God is evil, then he's not one, because the good should, right? Like, is he good or is he evil? So the Christians had such a problem with this that they created some concept called the devil, which is very perplexing exactly what that means, because does it have independent power other than God? That's like a hard thing. So I don't know. It could be that in the upper echelons of the church, it's like 5 guys who've worked it out. But your average person it's almost idolatrous the way they wind up believing in there being different powers. It's what's allowed them to do really horrible things to the Jews, because all this talk about turning the other cheek and the religion of love. And I've asked this again and again and again. I don't think it's made it into any of the videos yet, but I've asked this to Christians. I say, I don't understand. Why do you hate the ones who hate Jews? The Candace Owens, like, okay, but you believe yourself to be a Christian. Yes, but doesn't Jesus say, right, forgive them? They don't know what they're doing. Does he say be kind? Does he say turn the other cheek? Like, where's all that stuff? And they start saying synagogue of Satan and using devil and Satan. We don't love the devil, and Jews are the devil. This is where they go with it. In other words, all that stuff throughout history was justified. It's unbelievable, the power of Avodah Zarah. Meaning, when you don't acknowledge, not that you should be listening to what Jesus said anyway, but I'm just saying, like, the stuff he said that's straight out of Chumash, like, love thy neighbor, Like I wouldn't mind if they listened to that if I happen to be their neighbor. So yeah, it's a fascinating thing how they don't even the like you'll have like the black Israelite people who believe that they're the true Jews. They still hate us for killing Jesus. We killed it, not that. They don't believe they did it. Right? It's like nobody can get this clear once they get involved in a little Christianity. Isn't that funny? We're the real Jews, but you guys go, well, who are we? We're Turks. So what are you playing? Yeah, we're the Khazars, goofballs. Anyway, the meaning is, he says, that there is no such thing as evil. There's just no such thing. Everything's actually good. And that can't be understood in this world because this world is predicated. So Moshe's told by Hashem, you can't see me and live. There's no purpose in living if you don't understand all of this. But there is no such thing. So in the next world, we will see there was no Amalek. There's just no such thing. We got rid of the memory. It's gone. Like there was no such thing. That was all an illusion. It was all evil is just not real and it's false. But you won't appreciate that in this world. It can't be understood experientially in this world. It can be understood philosophically as an abstract concept. But you can't make those brachas. Follow? In other words, there are things we can know as an abstract concept that we just can't experience. And Olam Haba is ayin lo ra'asa elokim zulasecha yasa lemecha kelo. Ayin Olam Haba, the Gemara says, is something that no human sense, no eye can possibly fathom. So the example that I would give to you is just a person who's blind from birth can know that Australia exists just like you and I know Australia, whether we've been there or not, right? They can know a lot of things. They can know there's such a thing as color. They can know there's such a thing as a traffic light. They can be a driving instructor who tells people, at least in the in-class stuff, maybe not in the car, but they could say that red light means this, green light means that. Here's how many feet from a stop sign. They could teach you exactly what to do on a yellow light. And yet they've never seen yellow and they've never seen red. But they're not ignorant. They just can't experience it. And you could try to explain it to them and it'll never go anywhere. In fact, they even ask blind people. They've asked this. I once read about this. Would you want to be able to see? And like many of them say no. They're like, why? Like whatever their life is, like what would it even be? Like, do you really want to see? Like, I don't think so. Like maybe, I don't know. Like, and then when they can see, if you've ever seen those videos of the person hearing for the first time, it's like, whoa. There was no content. They didn't have a way. They're not seeing something extra cool. They're seeing. They didn't know there was such a sense. They didn't know what red is. There's no way you could have ever explained what a color is to that person. That's what Olam Haba is. The Rambam says in the commentary to the Mishnah that's how he understands that Gemara. Talking about these things, we can understand a lot about them. But we're sort of like the blind person. Experientially, we just can't get it. So that's the difference. Do you follow? In other words, the brachas are different. You can know now that everything is good in the world, but you won't be experiencing that. And therefore, you have to say Dayan Emes when something sad happens. And that's when someone goes to a Shiva house, they need to shut their mouth because there's nothing intellectually that's going to change the pain. Pain is pain, and that's an emotional thing. And intellect is a totally separate piece. And there's no words you could have. I always say this example, but I think it's a good example. Imagine there was like a huge tzaddik who could tell you anything you want. They really know everything. Eliyahu Hanavi comes down and says, Judy, this is your shot. So the person says, okay, you know what? I want to know why the Holocaust happened. Do you think that after getting the real answer from Eliyahu Hanavi, you would walk out of there whistling Dixie and just thrilled? And like, I no longer am at all bothered by the eradication of 6 million, right? Jews, millions and millions of children just slaughtered. Doesn't bother me anymore because I know the answer. So we're not taking the atheist perspective, like, because there is no answer, then nothing should bother you. I mean, if nothing means anything, we're all just amoeba. Like, it doesn't bother me that much if someone steps on a mosquito either, right? You have to, there has to be a huge amount of kavod for who that person is to even believe that imo anochi b'tzara, that there's any meaning to the person's pain. But the answer is, there is no such answer. That would be a psychopath. What we were created with, which is an emotional sense and a sense of suffering and pain, and is something you're supposed to empathize with, and that's all. That's the whole story. You feel it, you experience it, you move forward. You're not more religious if you feel less. You're not less religious if you feel more. That's not connected. And therefore, you go to a Shiva house. The agra debate tam yashtiku. So the Gemara says the reward you get is by sitting there quietly and just sharing somebody's pain. See it, acknowledge it, share the pain with them, lower your shoulder, try to, and that's all. That's what Moshe Rabbeinu did, and that was the right response. The fact that there's things he could have known and done would have it's a totally separate totally separate perspective, what you know. And therefore, ben olam hazeh olam haba, the difference between this world and the next world is how we experience these things. And in this world, we experience it as two brachos. We see pain and we see. Okay. Now, Reb Shimon Shkop has a very, very famous introduction to his Sefer Sha'arei Yosher. And it's a long one, but in the middle of it, there's a short piece where it's all about this subject. It's like 3 pages about this subject. Beautiful. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I'm going to take like a little paragraph here. He says, the hashkafa rishona, when you first consider it, rigshay ahavas atzmo v'rigshay ahavas zulaso, feelings of self-love, love for yourself, and feelings of love for others appear to be in conflict with one another. The words he uses literally ahim kitsaros zulazu. They're like co-wives, like they're both demanding the same attention, and it's they, by definition they're at odds with each other. He says, "Aval aleinu lehishtada lahamik bazeh." He says we actually have to look more deeply into this, because God created people. The entire creation of a human being, he established this earlier, was that a person should be desiring the highest level of pleasure, which is attachment to God, and to earn it. And he says, God made us this way, and you can't really break it. So he doesn't go with the communist route of saying, let's just get rid of the desire for personal. And he tries to explain the following. He says, Hashem wants us both to be totally selfless, and he wants us to be selfish. So this is the way to synthesize these two. Ha'ish hagas. He says the way to synthesize them is to figure out the quality of your ani. Who am I? The I in the middle of the storm, right? The letter I. Who am I? Ha'ish hagas v'hashafel. Yeah, the thick, low life. Echusa shel ha'ani shelo. The quality of his ani is mitzumsum rak bechomro v'gufo, is limited entirely to his physical body. And if he can feel a little bit better in his physical body for the next 10 minutes, so then he'll just inject whatever drug, and that's all he needs. Lamala mimenu, the next level, would be a person who feels that his ani is both his body and his nefesh, his soul, his mind. In other words, he's not satisfied. He's willing to experience some physical discomfort sometimes if it advances the fact that he can make some money, right? Or that he can accomplish something or learn something, or okay, that's a second level. He says the next person, Misha Machnis Laha'ani Shalo, the next level is a person who introduces to his ani not just his body and his mind, but also his family. B'nei Beso u'mishpachto. So now he selfishly cares about his family. It's not selfless. Ha'isha holech al pi darkei Torah. This is a person who then takes the instructions of the Torah and lives by them. So he will start to care very genuinely and personally about fellow Jews. Every Jew is just another body part of one big being. And he goes on and on. That the person becomes more and more, he says, it's not just about Judaism. He says, Ha'ish HaShalim, a truly complete person, Ro'i Lahashish Benafsha, should really take to heart over the course of his lifetime. Shekol ha'olamos kulam hu ha'ani shelo. Every bit of existence is part of his I. He's just a little small body part that's part of the big body which is called creation. And then he'll love every single Jew and all of humanity and all of the world. Everything. He'll love everything. He says that's what he thinks Hillel said. Hillel said, Im eina ni li, mi li. If I'm not for myself, who's for me? And if I am only for myself, what am I? So he said, it means a person has to realize all the time that he should always be thinking about himself. That's all you should ever think about is yourself. But nevertheless, a person should think, but who am I? And I am bigger than that. I'm bigger than just me. I'm my family. I'm my community. So in other words, if you think about what you would expect, and if you realize a Gadol B'Yisrael, right? A great Jewish person, a real great person. So they felt an enormous amount of empathy for people, right? The greater the person is, the more that they. So you come to a big tzaddik and you tell them your troubles, and they cry and cry. Why are they doing that? I mean, the answer is it's selfish for them. They feel the pain. If you would go to them and they would say, "Listen, I know it's a mitzvah to help the poor. I don't actually care about you. Here's a year's salary." So that man wouldn't be a gadol. Understand? That's not what you know that that's not a great person. I mean, it's a very generous act, and it's very holy. And a person who doesn't have those feelings yet should still act, right, in kind ways and give charity. But the feelings that should come, hakol lefi rov ha'maisa. The Rambam says the way to become a more generous person, meaning to have more feelings of generosity, is to give again and again. So he says a person who has $100 to give away, right, should give out $1 100 times, and each time they'll be exercising that muscle of giving. There's a question about that. They discuss what happens if like nobody needs one, right? You're going to give out pennies and you're not really helping anyone, and with one thing you could save lives. So then, right, it's very different. But in terms of the quality, if a person has the ability to make the same level of difference, the more actions they do, the better it is for them, because they okay. So that's going to be the idea of Imen Anili Mili. You see this, by the way, when you look at recent history with the communist idea. So they said, let's take away personal profit motive, and that'll be great. And then everyone, so you can't really break that. So there's a black market. There's like you can't really break that because Hashem made the world specifically for that. That people should be use that as the greatest vehicle of kindness. But you see, even in societies that. We'll see what's going to happen in New York. I mean, it's going to be disastrous if they really adopt these socialist policies, because when the government gets involved and there's no profit motive, things don't work. So just as an example, like you see this, I mean, people have studied a little bit of history, like, how do we know how many boots to make this winter? And that's just like, if the government's just, they always have shortages of this and surpluses of that, because it's not being based on people having to actually spend money and decide for themselves what's a worthwhile thing. And then there's no profit motive in the person who's making it. So they're not very creative. In other words, it's only with the free market that the entire world starts to work productively together. In fact, you even see this, meaning if the goal is that people should feel that the entirety of creation, you see this in Adam Harishon. Adam, David, Mashiach. That's what we're told. The letters Aleph, Daled, Mem, which spell Adam, is an acronym for Adam, David, and Mashiach. And we see that Adam Harishon sinned, and his punishment was by the sweat of your brow, you will eat bread. David HaMelech comes along from a city called Beis Lechem, right? And we first learn about David HaMelech in Tanakh very directly by telling a story about his great-great-grandmother. And it's a story about Ruth. And the end of the story is, and she eventually is the progenitoress of David HaMelech. That's what that book is. So what happens in the book of Ruth? It begins with a famine, right? Why? It was in the day when people judged one another. They judged their judges, Rashi says. There was no centralized strong government, and there was a famine in the land. Yeah, you'll find that every time in history when the government is failing and it doesn't keep the country together, that there's hungers. So that's what happened in this over here. There's like a bread shortage on this side, and there's tons of wheat on that side. Like no one can the government's not functioning, so it's not getting anywhere. That's always a story in history. And there's these people that came from Beit Lechem Yehuda, and their names are Elimelech and Naomi and their family. And then eventually, and the whole story happens in the wheat fields. Everything is about bread until we have this person, David HaMelech, who's Beit HaLachmi. Everything about him is bread. And it's like a very interesting theme. What is that theme? The Gemara says in Meseches Brachos that it's a very interesting Gemara, that it's talking about blessings that you make when you see a massive number of Jews together. So that's called an uchlasa. And it says the Gemara, Haroa uchlase Yisrael. If a person sees these throngs of Jewish people, 600,000 Jews in one place, so then he says a special bracha called Brich Chacham Harozim. Blessed are you, Hashem, who knows, like who's wise to the secrets. This is a story. This is a story in Brachas Daf Ches, where it tells about a story. Ben Zoma, this gentleman named Ben Zoima, saw Uchlasa al Gav Ma'ala Behar Habayis. So he was standing up on the top of Har Habayis, and he saw Jews. It's like an unbelievable thing to imagine. Aliyah Laregel, maybe, right? Jews just coming up from every side. And from his vantage point, he could see 600,000 Jews. And what did he say? Amar Baruch Hacham Harozin. First he said the bracha of Hashem who knows all the secrets, which Gemara explains why. And then Ubaruch, and blessed are you Hashem, Shebara Kol Elu, for making all these Jews Lisham Sheni, to serve me. They control the weather for me. They own all the banks for me. They're in charge of Hollywood, That's not what he meant. He explained. What do you mean they all serve me? Uhaya Omer, because he would explain. Kama Yegios, Yaga Adam Arishon. Do you know how hard it was for Adam Arishon at Shematza Pas Lechel until he found a piece of bread to eat? If they stuck a man and a woman on a desert island, how long would it take for those two people to be able to get a piece of bread? What would it take? Charash, you'd have to plow the earth. Vizara, and find seeds to plant and plant them. The kotzar, and you'd have to cut them. The imer, so this is all the malachos of Shabbos. Choresh, zorea, kotzer, ma'amer, dosh, zora, borer, tochen, meraked, lush, ofe. That's literally the order of the Gemara. All the malachos that you can't do on Shabbos is what it takes to make bread, the first whole batch of them. Okay, so that's part of you. Adam Rishon's whole job now is Bezeh Sapecha Tochelim is going to be an enormous job to make bread. That has something major to do with Shabbos, as you see. And then he ate. I've never done any of those things. Says Ben Zoma. I wake up in the morning, and some driver has gone to my favorite bakery because I pressed a button on my phone and brought fresh bread to my door. Unbelievable, right? So how does that happen? And he goes on, talks about how hard it is to find clothing, also is another interesting thing. But bread is his first example. For you to have a loaf of bread required all those things. Societies that work together, there's an abundance of bread. There's thousands and thousands of people that go into you eating a slice of bread every time you eat one. But a society that works together takes the millions of people and unifies them in one productive society. That is the goal of a melech. A melech, it's not about him feeding his own coffers. It's melech is Rosh Tevos lese migrame klum. It's out of order, but it means he has no personal identity. His identity is that he's the heart of the people. And the heart connects everything by pumping blood all over and making sure everything's connected. And that's the job of the king. So David HaMelech, right, is going to be Beis Halachmi. It's all going to be about bread, because that is the center of what Adam Arishon was supposed to build in this world, right? You're going to build a world that's productive, that brings out. In Gan Eden, bread grew on trees. Whatever that means, it didn't require all this hard work. It means it was very easy to access. And when Mashiach comes, it once again will be that easy to access. Now we're already getting very close in history. Right now, it's very conceivable that in 10 years, there's not a person involved in any of this. Entire fields are planted by machines and reaped by machines, and then, right, it's entirely conceivable that it will, to the point of it coming to your front door with a drone, that fresh bread will be baked and delivered all the way through. Because it says, when Mashiach comes, bread will grow on trees. And the Rambam says it doesn't mean it physically on a tree. It's an expression that means it will be as accessible as if it was growing. Right now, we're in like a fruit. It'll be that easy. You just pick it right off, and it's ready. And he gives example. He says that in general, people will talk that way. I guess in his time, they would use expressions like, oh, it's growing on trees. We say something's growing on trees doesn't mean it's actually growing on trees. It just means it's easy to make. It's easy to get. It's easy. So he says that's when Mashiach comes. So in any event, the entire world working together and seeing that that's our job, that's Geula. That's redemption. That's redemption. People being focused on themselves, being unable to open their eyes and their hearts to others, that's suffering and exile. That's the Beis HaMikdash being destroyed for sinas chinam. That's when a person just can't see the other person and have space for them. And being able to see that is redemption. So remember I told you about the Haggadah? What we say? This year, what is the next thing we say after? Again, this is the bread of affliction that our forefathers ate. They didn't have good bread. They had bread of affliction. Anyone who's hungry can come and eat. The next words are, now we're slaves. Next year we'll be free, right? Now we're here. Next year in the land of Israel. In other words, that's it. That's a secret. The secret of Golus is that the bread is the bread of affliction, and there's not enough, and everybody's at each other's throats and they can't see each other. And the secret of Geula is everyone working together. And when people have achdus and they work together, Lashana haba b'nei chorin, we can be. So you see it directly. It is tzedakah. It is the giving of. Rav Shimon Shkop says, he says a line like that here. He says it's tzedakah because the Beis Halevi says that in his comments to the Haggadah. The Beis Halevi throws in that we know that b'schus tzedakah the Jewish people will be redeemed, and that's why once we say anyone's hungry, come and eat. The next thing is Lashana haba b'nei chorin. But now we understand at a very deep level that that's the whole message. When they were slaves, so their eyes and hearts were closed; they just couldn't. But Hashem opening his eyes and hearts to us comes from our behavior because he gives us the chance and he's with us in the pain. He's just waiting for us to allow his eyes to be open. And how do you do it? Through the methodology of Moshe. Ki sar liros. There's another medrash that says the word sar also means furious. Sar v'za'ef huzeh. There's a language in Tanakh of sar v'za'ef, which means ragingly angry. Moshe was so angered by the pain of the Jewish people that he was the one to save. So feeling another person's pain is the highest level of human achievement. That's a Moshe Rabbeinu level of Vayigdal. That's how we connect into Moshe. We feel another person's pain, and it frees us. It frees us from. You see, you can only focus if you focus on yourself. And a person is very selfish. That's not the worst thing if they can keep expanding their identity of self, and they feel for another person and another thing, and so. That's what happened there in the Haggadah. That's why the Lashana haba b'nei chorin. He says here, even Rav Shimon Shkop has one last thing, where he says, imagine a person who was. He says, why do you get wealthy? Aser b'shvil shatis asher. If you give charity to the needy, right, to worthy causes, you will become wealthier. So he says, why is that? So he says, it's simple. He says, if there was somebody who was appointed by the king to take care of an otzar katan, a small storehouse of jewels or something, and if he keeps tafkido karoi, if he keeps his job, he does what he's supposed to do just as he's meant to, so then Yismanelios Gizbar al Otzar Golamizeh, then the king's going to give him a raise and give him even more money to be in charge of. Even if he doesn't, he's not excellent at everything in the job. He says if he's honest, and it's clear that he's honest, and he does a good job protecting that money and using it for the right thing, even if there's other ways that he falls short, they're going to keep promoting him because he can really be trusted. And he says that's how a person gets wealthier and wealthier. A person uses the things that he has in order to serve Hashem and in order to live a productive life, and he takes the money that he's given for charity and he honestly gives that 10% where it's supposed to go. So Hashem says, great, I've got a lot more money to give out. And I know that I can trust you that this will go to the right place. So he says it's a simple way. It will work that way in this world too. You have a rechnitz, he'll find somebody to take care of giving out some of his tzedakahs. When you're a billionaire and you give real tzedakah, just in Lakewood, and I noticed Binyan Rechnitz here and his name over there, and a beautiful thing. I mean, he's all over the country. So Hashem's going to say, listen, I have money to send all over the place, right? And he makes sure to also give to Chabad, and also to give to the Litvish, and also to Eretz Yisrael. So Hashem wants to send money to Uzbekistan. It could be the best place, right? It's going to be through that person who's shown that he'll look wherever it takes in order to do another mitzvah, another thing. So when we have that orientation, we're filled with bracha, because I no longer exist as myself. I exist as one of the body parts of Am Yisrael, one of the body parts of Jewish people. This is a very important message for the beginning of Sefer Shemos, where we go from individuals. The whole story in Bereshit is all about individuals. And in Shemos, we don't even tell you everyone's names. There was a man from Levi, and he took the daughter of Levi. We know that she was the daughter of Paro. It doesn't tell us her name, right? Again and again, Eila Shemos b'nei Yisrael haba Mitzrayim. And let me tell you the names of these people. And in the beginning of the book of Shemos, we jump away from telling you anyone's names. When we do tell you a name, it's not their name, it's their job, like Shifra and Pua. Well, we'll tell you who she was because she was Mishaperes the Vlad, but we don't know Shifra's real name until we read Rashi. It's Yocheved, right? And etc. It's like very interesting how, because when you become a nation, it's not so much about the individuals anymore. It's about what role do you play for the nation. And if you're a Miyaledes, that's what I need to know. If you're Mishaperes the Vlad, that's what I need to know. The Ishmi-based Levi who makes it right, who marries a Bas Levi, I need to know what family you're from and who you're helping and what you're doing. So it's very, very important to understand that we switch from a small little family, and where it's about everybody's personal journey, and we switch into a nation and say for Shemos. The first message is caring about one another, genuinely feeling the pain of another person, realizing that nobody's stealing your thing. They're your brother, they're your sister. You can hold space. I could stub my toe, and I could also be sad that you stubbed your toe. And they don't have to conflict, because the me can get bigger and bigger and bigger. That's what we're all supposed to be working on now. And that's all. Yashikoch.
First Miriam that doesn't give her name.
Right. Pua is Miriam.
First, Aaron, your brother is waiting for you. No name.
Oh, very nice. Right. His sister, right, doesn't say, right.